first strike and had not prepared the membership for the long haul, the gains won by the first strike would have been in jeopardy. It's just an example. In Toledo, during the Toledo Autolite strike, the leadership were members of the Reverend A.J. Muskie's Conference for Progressive Labor Action, later the American Workers' Party. In Minneapolis, many of the central leadership came from the Communist League of America, the American supporters of Leon Trotsky's international left opposition. And in San Francisco, the leadership was made up of members of the IWW and the One Big Union movement, which was an Australian offshoot of the IWW, as well as members of the Communist Party. The CP was in the midst of becoming completely Stalinized, but was still made up of members at this time who were honest trade union militants. Now, I'd like to touch a little on some of the tactics and strategies that were common between the three strikes that helped carry them to victory. The first was mass mobilization. Mass mobilization of the workers in the plants and industry, mass mobilization of the community in support of the strikers, and mass mobilization of the unemployed. In Toledo, the work of rank and file militants such as Ted Sealander, Sam Pollock, and Art Price, organizing the unemployed in the Lucas County Unemployed League, prevented the Toledo area employers from using the unemployed workers as scabs for the Auto-lite company. The leadership not only called out the entire Auto-lite plant, but also spread the strike to two related companies, the Logan Gear Company and Bingham Stamping. In San Francisco, the Communist Party had been doing similar work among that city's unemployed workers through their unemployed councils. When the strike leadership realized they had to, they spread the strike up and down the West Coast from Seattle to San Pedro. In Minneapolis, Teamsters Local 574 had been active in work among that city's unemployed. The union's contacts in groups like the Minneapolis Central Council of Workers and the Minnesota Farmers Holiday Association helped ensure that the majority of Minneapolis's 30,000 unemployed would be supporters of the strike instead of strikebreakers. The Minnesota Farmers Holiday Association even helped provide food for Local 574 strike kitchen. The strike leaders from the start summoned the whole working class community to their support. The Local 574 Women's Auxiliary, with a large membership, plunged into the strike, not only actively bolstering the picket line, but also helping to spread the support throughout the entire community. Local 574's leadership also utilized another very important tactic. They put out their own daily strike newspaper and broadcast via their own radio station. This allowed the union to provide the workers with constant updates and counter the lies of the boss's press. Another extremely innovative tactic used by Local 574 was the creation of roving pickets. Cars with squads of union men, dispatched by radio to areas of the city where advanced scouts had reported scab trucks, would surround the trucks and dump the scab coal in the street, usually in working class neighborhoods. The coal would then be picked up by families of workers on strike or the unemployed. That way the coal wouldn't go to waste. This tactic was later used by striking auto workers. They called them flying squadrons. Secondly, the strike leaders taught the workers not to put their faith and reliance on the national union heads to settle the strikes for them. In all three cases, the union bureaucrats actively worked with the bosses and the government to sell the workers out and end the strikes quickly and far short of the strikers' demands. In San Francisco, International Longshoremen's Association head Joe Ryan flew from New York to try and squelch the strike. Over the heads of the strike leaders, he signed an agreement with the ship owners, giving up the strikers' most important demand, a union-controlled hiring hall. The strikers up and down the coast repudiated Ryan, and the strike continued. In both Toledo and Minneapolis, the union heads intervened numerous times to end the strikes with little or no gains. But the strikers, with the help of their class struggle leadership, repudiated those labor lieutenants of the capitalist class as well. Third, a class struggle leadership always teaches the workers class independence in the political field and not to put their faith in elected friends of labor to solve the workers' problems for them. In Minneapolis, for instance, the leadership of Local 574 warned the membership again and again not to put their faith in any elected official, including that of Minnesota Farmer Labor Party Governor Floyd Olson, Olson later called out the National Guard against the strike and declared martial law, but the strike continued. Lastly was the strike leaders' insistence on calling forth the solidarity of the entire labor movement. In all three strikes, the workers were subjected to horrendous violence from police, National Guard, and company thugs. In each case, the leaders responded by calling for the solidarity of the labor movement, and in each case, the labor movement responded. In San Francisco, following a company reign of terror, a three-day general strike helped to secure a victory. In Minneapolis, in response to the brutal terror inflicted on the coal drivers, 35,000 building trades workers walked off the job. The Central Labor Council finally voted to support the strike, and workers from plants that weren't even organized walked off the job to join the picket lines. These are winning tactics and strategies, and it is important to stress that it was because the workers had a class struggle leadership in these cases that the tactics and strategies were employed. At this point, I'd like to recall a pivotal point in the early stage of the Auto-lite struggle. After the union struck, the company followed the usual first gambit in such a contest. It went to a friendly judge and got him to issue an injunction limiting picketing. The strike had begun to die on its feet when a committee of Auto-lite workers approached the Lucas County Unemployed League to ask for help. Two of the league's officers, Ted Sealander and Sam Pollock, along with several auto local members, wrote the following letter to Judge Stewart. I would like to read that letter. This comes from the book Labor's Giant Step by Art Price, who was one of the activists in the Toledo Autolite strike. Excellent book. And it begins, dated May 5th, 1934. His Honor, Judge Stewart, County Courthouse, Toledo, Ohio. Honorable Judge Stewart. On Monday morning, May 7th, at the Auto-lite plant, the Lucas County Unemployed League, in protest of the injunction issued by your court, will deliberately and specifically violate the injunction in joining us from sympathetically picketing peacefully in support of the striking auto workers' federal union. We sincerely believe that this court intervention preventing us from picketing is an abrogation of our democratic rights, contrary to our constitutional liberties, and contravenes the spirit and letter of Section 7A of the NRA. Further, we believe that the spirit and intent of this arbitrary injunction is another specific example of an organized movement to curtail the rights of all workers to organize, strike, and picket effectively. Therefore, with full knowledge of the principles involved and the possible consequences, we openly and publicly violate an injunction which, in our opinion, is a suppressive and oppressive act against all workers. Sincerely yours, Lucas County Unemployed League, Anti-Injunction Committee, Sam Pollock, Secretary. Price goes on to say by May 23rd, there were more than 10,000 on the picket line. This is but one example of a real class struggle leadership in action. This brings us finally to the question of revolutionary socialists and our participation as class struggle leaders in the labor movement. The vast majority of American workers, as we have said, are not yet conscious of themselves as a class. But as revolutionary socialists, our job is to use what we know politically to help lead a militant but not yet class-conscious union movement through the traps and snares that are set up to limit unions from winning their battles, and in the process begin to educate a layer of that membership in the ways of the capitalist system and how to best fight that system. This is what we refer to as helping workers make that transition from trade union consciousness to class consciousness. Workers very seldom come to class consciousness on their own. Some do, but most are won over by participating in the class struggle and their association with class-conscious militants, socialists who themselves were won to the struggle. This is what is known as revolutionary historical continuity. Many San Francisco waterfront workers were won over to class consciousness through their contacts with members of the IWW or Communist Party members and the Marine Workers Industrial Union. In Minneapolis, Farrell Dobbs, a leader of that strike, was a coal yard worker with dreams of owning his own business. It wasn't until the class struggle struck him squarely between the eyes by way of wage and hours cuts on the job, and he came into contact with Ray Dunn and Dunn's brothers, Grant and Miles, and Carl Skoglund, The Dunn brothers and Skokie were longtime revolutionary socialists and trade union militants who also worked as coal haulers and had deep roots as class struggle fighters going back to the IWW, the Socialist Party left wing, and the founding of the Communist Party. Revolutionary historical continuity. So, what lessons can we learn today? Are we in the beginnings of a new labor upsurge? That's open for debate. Some say no, others are more optimistic. So let us turn to some numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics concerning work stoppages due to strikes recently. Quick perusal of our interwebs tells us that 2018 saw the highest number of workers on strike since 1986, 485,000. That was 2018. In 2019, the number of strikers declined slightly to 425,500, but this included over 40,000 General Motors workers. That number, while higher than the number of workers on strike in 1932, still a damn sight fewer than the number of workers on strike in 1933, which was over 1,100,000. 2018 also saw the highest number of major strikes since 2007. It's 20 major strikes in 2018. That contrasts with the year before, 2017, when there were only 7 major strikes. In 2019, the number of major strikes rose from 20 to 25. That number included 13 major strikes in the educational services sector alone. But since January of 2020, of course, we have entered a period unlike anything we've seen in a century. But even in this age of pandemic, quarantine, and social distancing, working people look to be on the move in ever-increasing numbers. We've seen union electrical workers walk off the job at GE's Lynn, Massachusetts plant, demanding reconversion from jet engine to ventilator production. Union carpenters, along with many other unionized workers, striking their job sites and workplace, demanding health and safety protection, and various wildcat strikes of non-union workers at distribution centers around the country. According to the Payday Report, it's a crowd-funded online pro-labor journal, since the beginning of March, there have been over 140 wildcat strikes, most of them taking place without much of any leadership from the union heads or reporting in the media. We can't just simply throw around numbers. They only tell us part of the story. Public support for unions, especially among young people, is at its highest level in 15 years. So important. That also corresponds with an increasing curiosity and, in many cases, acceptance of socialist ideas. So, does this portend the beginnings of a new labor upsurge? What it does show is a definite hunger among young working people for what they see as new ideas, what we see as old ideas presented in new ways to help them make sense of the present class struggle. Remember what I said earlier about historical continuity, revolutionary historical continuity. That is us. Revolutionary socialists ready to use our knowledge of the struggles of the past to help the present generation of workers toward class consciousness in the future. You represent the future class struggle leadership if you choose to accept that mantle. If these recent strikes show us anything, they show us that working people are more willing to accept leadership by those who have that revolutionary historical continuity, and those who will be able to help them make that move from union consciousness to class consciousness. Thank you.